In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, August 16th, President Yoon Suk-yeol has pledged to promote development in North Korea should it surrender its nuclear ambitions. And the US State Department has voiced support for Yoon's efforts to engage Pyongyang. Bill Gates has highlighted the importance of global collaboration on the health front in the wake of diseases like COVID-19. The remarks were made at the National Assembly earlier on this Tuesday, ahead of his meeting with President Yoon Suk-yeol. Meanwhile, over the next 5 years, the Yoon administration plans to provide the market with some 2.7 million homes nationwide, with the supply centered in areas of high demand. President Yoon Suk-yeol detailed an extensive blueprint of development for North Korea should it surrender its nuclear ambitions. The plan was shared during a speech to mark Liberation Day on Monday. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
South Korea must improve relations with Japan by overcoming historical disputes and achieve peace with North Korea as key steps towards boosting the stability and security of Northeast Asia and beyond. That's President Yoon Suk-yeol as he spoke at a ceremony on Monday, marking 77 years since Korea's liberation from Japan's 1910 to 1945 colonial rule.
저는 북한이 핵 개발을 중단하고 실질적인 비핵화로 전환한다면 그 단계에 맞춰 북한의 경제와 민생을 획기적으로 개선할 수 있는 담대한 구상을 지금 이 자리에서 제안합니다.
Among the proposed were a large-scale food program, ways to enhance agricultural productivity and foreign investment, which Seoul's top office called a bold action.
It's a bold proposal as it actively seeks economic support measures for the regime at an early stage if North Korea returns to the denuclearization talks with sincerity.
The South Korean leader also took the occasion to make clear of his intention to improve Seoul-Tokyo ties, one that have been at a record low over disputes such as Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women and the use of forced labor.
한일 관계의 포괄적 미래상을 제시한 김대중 오부치 공동선언을 계승하여 한일 관계를 빠르게 회복하고 발전시키겠습니다. 양국 정부와 국민이 서로 존중하면서 경제, 안보, 사회, 문화에 걸친 폭넓은 협력을 통해 국제사회의 평화와 번영에 함께 기여해야 합니다.
Addressing the public with only 2 days left until his 100th day in office, the South Korean leader also touched upon economic tasks that lie ahead, ranging from the immediate task of compensating for last week's flood damage to long-term plans such as belt-tightening in the public sector and regulatory reform. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And in related news, the US State Department has voiced support for President Yoon Suk-yeol's efforts to engage North Korea. Kim Hyo-san reports.
Washington has expressed support for President Yoon Suk-yeol's plans to resume diplomacy with North Korea. US State Department Press Secretary Ned Price said during a briefing Monday that the US will continue to work closely with South Korea to that end. Emphasizing trilateral cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, he explained that it is America's shared goal with Seoul as well as other allies and partners to achieve the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. He then urged the North to return to dialogue, which he says can result in practical, pragmatic steps to achieve the ultimate denuclearization goal. The comments come on the heels of President Yoon's offer to help significantly enhance the North's economy if and when the regime takes steps to denuclearize. In his first Liberation Day address Monday, Yoon explained that this was part of the, quote, audacious initiative that he first presented during his inaugural address 3 months ago. He also stressed that Pyongyang's denuclearization is essential for sustainable peace on the Korean peninsula, in Northeast Asia, and around the world. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, Bill Gates expects to enhance his partnership with South Korea on response mechanisms to global health challenges. Remarks to this end were shared in a speech at the National Assembly earlier on this Tuesday morning. Now, highlighting South Korea's standing as the 10th largest economy in the world, Gates claimed the country will have a greater impact on the global society through collaborations with his foundation and other multilateral health agencies. Also, later on this Tuesday afternoon, Gates meets with President Yoon Suk-yeol, who plans to address health justice with the visiting philanthropist and ways for South Korea to play a more active role in ensuring the well-being of the less fortunate worldwide. Intentions to this end were shared by Yoon during doorstepping also earlier on this Tuesday morning. In other news, the Yoon administration has unveiled its first housing supply plan. During a related meeting on this Tuesday, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho said some 2.7 million homes will become available nationwide over the next 5 years, as pledged by President Yoon Suk-yeol on his campaign trail. The new homes will be supplied in high-demand regions, including the Greater Seoul area, through active redevelopment projects, that is. Also, the government plans to provide some 500,000 new homes at prices below 70% of market prices to newlyweds, young adults and those making their first home purchases. Parts of the country that have been exposed to recent record rainfall are still reeling from its aftermath, and authorities remain on high alert as more downpours are in the forecast. Our Shin Yeon reports.
South Korea last week saw the heaviest amount of rain in decades. 14 people died, 6 people are still missing, and 26 were injured. That's the tally the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters had as of 6 a.m. this Tuesday. The heavy rainfall that pounded the Greater Seoul region, Gangwon-do Province, Chungcheongnam-do Province, and Jeollabuk-do Province damaged over 10,000 buildings. Rural areas were also affected. Floods destroyed roughly 17.5 square kilometers of crops, an area around the size of 1,200 soccer pitches. More than 81,000 livestock died, and roughly 300 landslides were reported. Authorities are on high alert as we'll be seeing even more downpours in the next 24 hours. The Korea Meteorological Administration has forecast that the southern part of the country could see more than 150 millimeters of rain. That's why President Yoon Suk-yeol held a meeting late on Monday night, where he instructed local governments and officials to be prepared and have all safety measures ready ahead of time. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
And the torrential downpour has pushed up prices of vegetables, and fears are mounting about further hikes as South Korea looks ahead to celebrate Chuseok, which falls in early September this year. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
Record rainfall in parts of South Korea has led to steep price rises for vegetables like cabbage and radish. This is because of damage to farms by the heavy rain, which even delayed vegetable shipments. On the domestic wholesale market, the price of 10 kilograms of cabbage soared more than 60% from a month ago and more than doubled from a year ago. Radish is also up 45% from a month ago, and the prices of other vegetables such as zucchini and green onions also jumped sharply. With consumer prices rising 6.3% last month and vegetable prices surging ahead of the Chuseok holiday when demand for agricultural, livestock, and seafood products surges, the burden on households is expected to rise sharply as well. In response, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho said the government is making every effort to stabilize prices by visiting high-altitude cabbage farms to safeguard supply and monitoring shipment delays and the deterioration of crops due to the weather conditions.
We are working hard to cut costs in the distribution phase. I hope that such measures will help with the shopping cart prices.
The government also announced plans to release food from stockpiles and issue discount coupons on a large scale to alleviate the burden on households caused by high inflation. In particular, ahead of Chuseok, the government plans to issue discount coupons worth nearly $49.5 million to needy consumers to be used on livestock and fishery products, which are in high demand during the holiday season. While the discount coupons should help consumers with more affordable goods, watchers fear that supply will not be able to meet demand, causing further inflation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Yoon administration marks its first 100 days in office this week, and in light of this event, our senior top office correspondent Moon Gon-young looks back at the history behind the symbolic significance of the 100-day period and its meaning in measuring a leader's success.
Ever since Franklin D. Roosevelt coined the term in the 1930s, the first 100 days in office have become a yardstick in measuring the achievements of presidents and political leaders around the world. But how effective is the 100-day mark in judging a president's success?
First 100 days is just a tiny fraction of a 5-year South Korean presidential or 4-year U.S. presidential term. But the idea that a lot can be achieved in a short period originated long before U.S. President Roosevelt.
So help me God.
Exiled French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte's escape from the island of Elba in 1815, returned to power in Paris, and subsequent defeat of the Battle of Waterloo, all in under 4 months, is known as Le 100 Jours. However, it wasn't until the 20th century, when FDR was elected as President of the United States, that the term became a political catchphrase. Roosevelt was elected at a time when the country faced severe challenges during the Great Depression. The urgent economic situation allowed FDR to achieve a remarkable amount in the first 100 days of his presidency, managing to pass a record 76 bills into law. He also coined the term fireside chat by speaking directly to the public through a radio broadcast.
I want to tell you what has been done in the last few days and why it was done and what the next steps are going to be.
Roosevelt's leadership style, along with the extraordinary speed of reform, cemented his popularity, setting the 100-day benchmark by which all future presidents would be measured. But what about South Korean presidents? How did they fare a little over 3 months in office, and did they all enjoy a long enough honeymoon period?
대통령으로서의 직책을 성실히 수행할 것을 국민 앞에 엄숙히 선서합니다.
Kim Young-sam, the first civilian to hold the office in over 30 years, enjoyed an 80% approval rating 100 days into his single 5-year term. His successor Kim Dae-jung got elected at the height of the economic crisis in December 1997 and faced the formidable challenges of economic reform and democratic consolidation as he entered office in 1998.
우리 모두는 지금 땀과 눈물과 고통을 요구받고 있습니다. 오늘의 어려움 속에서 국민 여러분께서는 놀라운 욕심과 계획을 발휘하셨습니다. 국민 여러분은 나라의 위기를 극복하기 위해 금모으기에 나섰습니다. 이미 20억 달러가 넘는 금을 모아주셨습니다.
100 days later, Kim Dae-jung's job approval also stood at a relatively high 62%. Even though politics around the world has seen significant changes since FDR, political analysts argue that the first 100 days is still a presidential honeymoon during which they wield extra influence. However, the honeymoon period can be short, as was the case for South Korea's 17th president, Lee Myung-bak. He saw his ratings plunge to 21% a little over 3 months into his term, the lowest for any South Korean presidents at the 100th day mark.
Rare. You know, the Lee Myung-bak protest, which was about the import of U.S. beef and concerns about now mad cow disease, had about 100,000 people in the streets, and his approval rates fell to about 21%.
Lee's ratings, however, saw a rebound in the following year and a half to reach 47% at the end of his second year in office. The first 100 days may be an effective political campaign slogan, but is it a benchmark that matters?
It's an early indicator of whether or not the presidency is on the right track. And I think that normally in cases where there is an indication that things may not be going well, it's an opportunity for a course correction. And so in that respect, I think that this reflection of 100 days, of course, it's a little bit of a false measure, because the 100-day period is only how well you get out of the starting block. But it's a 5-year race. It's not a 100-day race. And so ultimately, the ability of an administration to accomplish its objectives It can get good headwinds by doing well in its initial phases, but it's not uncommon to see stumbles out of the block and then some kind of recovery. Certainly, we've seen that in the United States fairly regularly.
Bill Clinton, for one, had a rocky first 100 days, but went on to win re-election in 1996. For most presidents and political leaders today, the ghost of Roosevelt looms large. A successful first 100 days can build momentum, personal credibility, and political capital, which any politician would be grateful for. But history has also shown that a leader's early actions do not necessarily make or break their presidency, and plans can quickly be overturned by events beyond their control. Presidential historians say many of the things that are written about the first 100 days are long forgotten by the end of a president's term, and they often have nothing to do with a president's actual success. 문건영, Arirang News.
Right, and that ends part one of the Daily Report. In part two, we explore the soaring popularity of Webtoons. Stay with us.
What matters?
Welcome back. Webtoons are Korea's latest cultural phenomenon, and their global popularity appears to have taken a life of its own. For more on this, I have Thomas Maresca, Asia correspondent for UPI, here in the studio. Thomas, it's good to see you again.
Great to see you.
I also have Rob Selkowitz, senior contributor at Phobes, live on the line. Rob, it's a pleasure.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Right, Thomas, let's begin with a few words on the origin of the term Webtoon, which was coined here in South Korea, I believe, and on perhaps the size of its industry.
Yeah, so I guess it's around 20 years old. The first platform that actually used the term Webtoon was by Daum, which was a web portal, later has merged with Kakao, and Naver, which operates the biggest Webtoon portal now, came around in about 2004. At that time based on computer screen still and, scrolling comics though. But I think in the 2010s with the emergence of the smartphone is when Webtoons really sort of came into their own and almost became this new medium, of just the scrolling, single panel kind of format. And it's grown tremendously. I mean, in recent years especially. Latest number I've seen domestically in Korea, it passed the 1 trillion won mark in 2020. It's like 800 million US. Globally, I've seen some market research reports that pegged it at around 3.7 billion globally, and projections are quite high. Over, one thing I saw was over 56 billion by 2030, and even within Korea, that 2020 number was like a 65% growth from the year before. I think the COVID pandemic boosted a lot of online industries. But, yeah, it's been growing at home and internationally really tremendously.
Right. And Rob, last month you shared an extensive piece on Naver Webtoon's efforts to further expand into the US market. Could you tell us a bit about its plans to pay millions to its creators to make mobile comics and about the response there to these intentions by Naver Webtoon?
Sure. I think it's an important step toward changing perceptions because here the platform is still emerging. It's very popular, but inside the mainstream comics publishing industry, I don't think it's very well understood. And people look at a platform that has a lot of user-generated content, and they may assume that the creators on that platform either aren't paid or aren't paid very well for the work that they're doing. And, it's a competitive market for talent. So it's very important for a company like Webtoon to make sure that people understand this is professionally produced content, and the people that are doing it have opportunities to monetize and sometimes make a really good living. I think in the industry, people may have been a little bit surprised about the amount because 27 million US is about what a mid-tier comics company would pay for a year's worth of content from professional comics creators. And that puts Webtoon's position in the market in a context that other people in the industry can understand, and they can look at it and say, oh yes, this is a serious player.
Right, I see. And Thomas, also last month, news of a Webtoon published by Naver being lauded at the Eisner Awards made local headlines here. Could you tell us a bit more about the significance of this latest recognition?
Yeah, I mean, it follows on what Rob said, I think, in terms of this was a symbol of kind of a mainstream acceptance. The Eisner Awards are one of the major US-based comic industry awards, sort of the Academy Awards of comics, I guess. And the fact that a Webtoon-based product, Lore Olympus is the name of it, by Rachel Smythe, who's from New Zealand, won the best web comic category. It's the first time a Webtoon took that award. And so obviously it's a step towards, understanding and accepting in the mainstream. And, by the way, though, that particular Webtoon also made it to the top of the New York Times bestseller list and published in a graphic novel format, and won some other, the Harvey Award and other major comics awards. So that's been a show of success for the platform in the mainstream.
Right. And against that backdrop, Rob, what look to be the broader implications, if I may, of such market expansion by Naver on the US comic industry as a whole?
Well, the impact has really been positive. I mean, for years, the U.S. comics publishing industry has been talking about expanding the market and trying to get younger, more diverse audience, but they haven't really been able to do it. And Webtoon is delivering on that. So that's a net benefit for the entire industry. From an economic perspective, as Thomas was talking about, the U.S. comics industry last year, all up, digital, print, graphic novels, comics, everything, was about $2 billion U.S., all put together. In that same time, Webtoon says it made nearly $1 billion U.S. in their worldwide operations, which means that one company is accounting for half of the economic output of the entire U.S. comics business. So it's not a company that people that are in the industry are used to thinking about because it's an app, not a publisher. So one of the things that Webtoon is doing is creating relationships with print publishers, like DC Comics, for example, trying to cross-pollinate the traditional audience for U.S. superhero comics and things like that, bring them onto the Webtoon platform, and then also bring this exciting young new audience that they're developing on their own app into the rest of the business to keep everything healthy.
Right. Thomas, with regard to South Korea's Webtoon industry to expand its presence beyond national borders, I understand that we introduced India to the world of Webtoons. What more can you tell us about the local industry's efforts to expand into foreign markets beyond that of the US?
Yeah, it is a growing global operation. Naver, from what I've seen, I think they count their monthly user base as 82 million subscribers now, and 75% of those are overseas. And so, right, the US is still, I think, the largest single market, but as you mentioned, India, there was a company called Cross Comics that was formed by a Korean entrepreneur based in India that was taking Korean-made content and translating it into 3 languages there. They actually just got absorbed by Kakao, and they co-produced one of the recent Netflix adaptation called Business Proposal. So we're seeing a lot of, cross-pollination. Japan, which obviously has its own very well-established manga and anime industry, Korean platforms dominate their market for Webtoons as well. There's a Piccoma is the Kakao branded one, and Line is the Naver brand, and they account for like 70% of the Japanese Webtoon market. Southeast Asia, there's growing popularity. I think in some Europe, France, there's been interest. So, we'll probably discuss it as well, but it really kind of coincides with other K content that is, expanding its reach around the world.
Right, it really does, and we will get to that soon.
Yeah.
Rob, your article asserts that Naver Webtoon now counts the US as its fastest growing market. How do you explain the popularity of Webtoons published on Korean platforms among international audiences?
Well, I think Thomas was right that, Americans, like everybody else, are being captivated by this explosion of creativity coming out of Korea, whether it's K-pop or K-dramas or, films like Parasite, and that includes the manhwa comics. So I think the association of that and the fact that so much of this media in other ways is being developed from these platforms has got people curious. The thing about the U.S. market and the reason that it's growing so fast is it was starting from a low point because, I think through most of the teens, American consumers were, 5 or 10 years behind South Korea in how we use our mobile devices for entertainment and services. And so while Webtoon was growing in South Korea and Asia, the U.S. market was just kind of sitting there doing nothing. So as Thomas said, there's a U.S. company that was fairly successful called Tapas that was acquired by Kakao last year. And Kakao paid quite a bit of money to acquire that company, I think precisely because they had figured out good strategies for the North American audience. And this was a way to come to eye level with Webtoon. But if you ask anybody under 25 at this point, there's no question about the popularity of the Webtoon format and the Webtoon platform. It's just how people read comics now.
Right, good to know. Thomas, in sharp contrast, the popularity enjoyed by Webtoons now, just 25 years ago here in South Korea, comic books were considered harmful to youngsters. They said the comic books nurtured a culture of profanity and obscenity. Do you care to elaborate on that?
I did a little bit of research into this, and it looks like it dates back to like the 60s, this anti-comics crusade as something that's, dangerous or corrupting of the youth. And I guess there used to be these comic reading rooms in Korea where kids would go. They're almost library-like places to read. And that was also the first place that TV started to pop up. So I think they were seen as these dens of, poor influence in places that would drag you away from studying. And there were a few high-profile incidents with kids that had, one, I think in the 70s, there was a kid who accidentally committed suicide trying to imitate one of his comic characters, and that sparked a big moral outrage, mothers against comics, that kind of thing. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think there were public comic book burnings into the 90s. Interestingly, though, a lot of people within the industry here talk about the 90s as kind of a low point of comics in Korea, partly due to the IMF financial crisis and there was an influx of Japanese content. And I think that set the stage for the rise of this new, what became the Webtoon platform, because there was creators wanted somewhere to go, and here we are.
Right, we are. Rob, on the Webtoon front, and on a personal note, what are some of your favorites? And would you say then that the fact that these Webtoons are available on mobile platforms makes reading them a more enjoyable experience, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm an old guy. I'm not the target audience. I'm a traditional comics fan. I like the full page reading. So I look at a lot of this stuff for my work, because the business side of it is very interesting. And then I start reading, and of course, Lore Olympus, which just won the Eisner Award, is really clever and beautifully drawn. I think it deserves all of the awards and popularity that it's getting. There's one called Let's Play by Leanne Krejcik that I think is being adapted for a television show here in the States that is kind of a workplace comedy, slice of life, about a woman who works at a video game company. I was just at San Diego Comic-Con, and I did a panel on Webtoon with some of the executives and creators. One of the creators on that panel goes by Instant Miso, and she does a strip called Eternal Nocturnal, which is sort of urban fantasy. And it's just beautifulally drawn, and this is her third strip, and she's really mastered how to tell the story in that vertically scrolling format. And it's just a different mindset. But the creators that have come up doing that kind of work are now getting really, really good at it, and it's become almost its own medium.
Right. Now, Thomas, as Rob mentioned, moving forward, there are some of our most popular K-drama series in recent days have been adapted from Webtoons, my personal favorite being Itaewon Class. We also have Hellbound and All of Us Are Dead, which my daughter enjoyed tremendously. Have you seen them? And what are your thoughts on this collaboration, which you mentioned earlier, which includes K-pop artists as well, pop artists, singing on the original soundtracks?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's kind of becoming, I think a lot of the players in the content industry just are looking at the whole thing as this IP universe where there's just complete overlap between them. But yeah, I mean, that when you mentioned Itaewon Class and Hellbound, like that's sort of what got me a little bit interested in Webtoons, because I had seen the series and, had heard about Webtoons, but hadn't looked into them. And I was curious, what was they were the origins of these shows. How does that translate? And yeah, it seems to be a really natural fit. Some people I've talked to in the industry here talk about the fact that the Webtoon format is so well suited towards adapting screen content, because they're almost like storyboards for a film or a TV. And as you mentioned, also K-pop has fallen into the mix. There's a BTS-inspired Webtoon called Seven Fates, and they did the a soundtrack song for that, and other K-pop acts have contributed. Now there are songs that are soundtracks to Webtoons, and we're just sort of seeing this cross-pollination of these universes. And even the flip side is happening, where a popular show like this Extraordinary Attorney Woo Young-woo, which started as a TV series, is being adapted into a Webtoon. So there's really, quite a three-dimensional, 360-degree sort of...
Right, cross-pollination, as you said. Rob, what are your prospects with regard to Korea's Webtoon industry, and what government support do you believe would serve to perhaps further boost the industry's expansion overseas, especially as the new administration here seeks to sharpen the country's cultural appeal?
Well, I think they've already got a really strong and competitive product, and it's a really successful formula. They're attracting readers, they're attracting creators, they're integrating with Wattpad, which is this fiction platform that they acquired last year, and turning it into this conveyor belt to turn all of this user-created content into big media properties. So I spoke with the CEO of Webtoon last year. He has a real vision for the company, and best of all, he's got a real passion for comics. So I think that's, the right idea. In terms of government support, that's kind of a tricky question, because, the U.S. does not typically give government support to cultural businesses. And so it may raise issues in the industry that's already kind of becoming aware of a competitor, to realize that the competitor was being subsidized by a foreign government, that might actually hurt them more than help. But that said, the numbers show that just executing on their current strategy is enough if they're making these kind of market gains. I think the Webtoon industry is looking very good in America for a long time to come.
Right, and staying with that then, Thomas, what are your thoughts on prospects, well, thoughts that is, future thoughts on Korea's Webtoon industry going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still in kind of an early stage, amazingly, as much as it has been done already. You know, I think I would be remiss to not mention there are some issues as well within the industry. As much as content creators are getting paid in certain cases very well, you know, there's a lot of people working at the margins, and with the growth of the popularity, it's a common thing you hear from creators here anyway, is being overworked, underpaid. There was a very high-profile death of a Webtoon artist from the Webtoon Solo Leveling recently that some are tying to the sense that the idea that maybe it was overwork, which exists, you know, in other sectors in Korea and around the world as well. So that's also something that has plagued the anime industry in Japan. So that's something to watch. I mean, I think the equity of the industry still needs to sort of get sorted out, but generally speaking, you know, it's really a platform that, yeah, it really almost is its own medium, I think, now, and you can just see how you know, how far it can really go.
Right, and far it can go as long as it takes care of those less privileged. All right then, Rob, thank you, Thomas, that is, thank you so much for your time today. And Rob, over in the US, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
Blackpink is looking to become the first Korean girl group to perform live at the MTV Video Music Awards. MTV says the group will perform its new song Pink Venom, which is set to be released on Friday. In 2020, Blackpink became the first Korean girl group to win a VMA, clinching the Song of the Summer award. And the group has also been nominated in the new Best Metaverse Performance category. Member Lisa is also in contention for Best K-pop Video for her solo hit La Lisa. The awards take place on August 28th at the New Jersey Prudential Center. And a popular Korean drama has been fueling fresh interest in marine mammals, and many are choosing to travel to the southeastern city of Ulsan to watch whales. Our Yoon Jin offers us a glimpse.
Just in time for the summer vacation season, visitors are flocking to the East Sea off Ulsan City to board the whale-watching tour ship. The people are more excited to see the whales than irritated from having to wait in a long line in the scorching heat. Of all the marine life that may be seen, dolphins are the most popular, though a dolphin sighting isn't always guaranteed as it depends on weather conditions. Sparking this interest is the popular K-drama Extraordinary Attorney Woo, which has a reoccurring whale theme. The main character, a lawyer with autism spectrum disorder, has moments of enlightenment that feature majestic scenes of her favorite whales. In the last 2 years, the whale-watching tour ship had less than 10,000 passengers each year. But this year, the number of passengers for the tour has already surpassed that mark, and record numbers are expected by the year's end. Ulsan City is also responding to demand by changing the existing route of the tour ships to show more whales, and also expanding the number of whale tour ships by 30% effective August 15th. And for the entire month of August, there are special benefits for visitors that have unique names like the Extraordinary Attorney Woo.
For the month of August, we have a promotion for visitors that have names that are the same forwards and backwards, like Woo Young-woo. They can use the Whale Culture Zone free of charge, and we're also preparing various programs for the Whale Festival that's set to be held for the first time in 3 years in October.
August is the best time for whale watching, as it's the time when seawater temperatures rise and the whales gather closest to the coast of Ulsan City. The popularity of the K-drama is expected to make whale memories for many this summer, not to mention the chance for a healing trip out on the sea. Yoon Jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, ministry findings show the number of unicorn companies is expanding here in South Korea. My colleague Shin Se-byuk has more on this phenomenon and its prospects.
South Korea has become a cradle for IT startups. According to the Ministry of SMEs and Startups, as of the first half of this year, there are 23 in the country that each have a valuation of over $1 billion, making them what's called a unicorn company. And 19 of them are IT firms. Meet two of this year's 5 new unicorns. They focused on developing their unique selling point to win their spots on the list.
We prioritize consumers' convenience in terms of making reservations. So we introduced various payment options and a way to change or cancel a booking more easily.
This grocery shopping mall looked to automation to speed up its early morning delivery system.
We minimized any tasks that were unnecessary and introduced automation to optimize our distribution center.
Though these unicorns are from different industries, they have one thing in common. They have adopted the platform business model.
It creates value by offering exchanges between two or more interdependent groups. Easily put, companies are playing a moderator role between the consumers and producers. One expert explains that South Korea's characteristics in terms of geography and natural resources have led to the rise in platform businesses.
South Korea is a small country that lacks natural resources, but it managed to successfully develop advanced ICT and mobile technologies, and these allowed many unicorns to realize their innovative ideas by using the platform model.
Then which industry or sector will be the next to foster a unicorn? The same expert says entertainment and leisure industries could be contenders thanks to the Hallyu wave. While the Ministry of SMEs and Startups says industries related to the fourth industrial revolution are the likely candidates.
We expect to have unicorns in the semiconductor and AI industries, as they have successfully attracted a lot of investors.
To further foster Korean unicorns, the ministry plans to facilitate investment in startups through private-public sector cooperation. Also from 2023, it will select and support 1,000 promising startups for 5 years. Experts, meanwhile, emphasize the importance of a business-friendly environment through deregulation to allow startups to fly in for new, innovative tryouts. 신새벽, Arirang News.
In Afghanistan, the Taliban is taking the country there precisely 2 decades into the past with regard to education for women and girls. Our Kim Yeon-sung shares their plight.
This is 16-year-old Karishma Rashidi. She dreams of becoming a journalist.
I want to become a successful journalist in the future. I would love to serve my country, and education is my basic human right. I want to continue my education so I can convey the miseries of other women to the authorities.
But the basic right of a secondary school education has been out of her reach for almost a year. Last August, the Taliban reclaimed authority over her country, Afghanistan. After a swift 10-day raid over the country, Taliban fighters took over the capital city of Kabul on August 15th to fully reclaim power. Those who remember the Taliban's rule from 2 decades ago worried that the Taliban authorities would repeat their reign of terror. But the Taliban assured that things would be different this time. They vowed to respect women's rights. But their actions did not follow their words. A month after their takeover, the Taliban ordered all boys and male teachers to return to schools. Female classmates and teachers were not mentioned, so the vast majority of schools have closed for girls. And in March, the Taliban authorities banned secondary school girls from returning for the new semester.
The damage will not, however, be limited to that generation of girls alone. Afghanistan as a whole is being denied the benefit of women and girls' contribution to society.
The Taliban, with its extreme ideology that they have against women, have not changed. They are the same Taliban of 20 years ago, but we can't be the women of 20 years ago.
And in May, the Taliban ordered women to cover their faces in public, just like the nightmare from 20 years ago. But this time, women are not staying silent.
We'll raise our voices against every injustice until our last breath. We'll stand against all the tyranny imposed by the Taliban on the people of Afghanistan, especially the women of Afghanistan.
Afghan women over the year have been staging protests, teaching in informal schools, and demanding their rights back, so that the progress made over the past 20 years is not completely lost. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Myanmar, the country's ousted leader has been handed an additional jail term. In a court ruling on Monday, former leader Aung San Suu Kyi was convicted on further corruption charges. The decision by the military-controlled court adds 6 years on top of her 11-year sentence. The closed-door trial dealt with 4 corruption cases, which alleged the deposed leader rented public land below market value and that she used charity donations to build a house. She was given a sentence of 3 years for each offence, with 3 of those terms being served concurrently. Suu Kyi and her co-defendants plan to appeal the sentence. According to analysts, Myanmar's military junta has been charging Suu Kyi with these numerous allegations in an attempt to legitimize their power grab in February 2021. A week after presidential elections were held in Kenya, a new president-elect has been declared, with Deputy President William Ruto named the country's new leader on Monday. The tight election race saw Ruto pull ahead of opposition leader Raila Odinga with 50.49% of the vote. However, the result was not without controversy, as 3 of the country's 7 senior election officials have disputed the outcome. They say the vote counting process was not transparent enough and have cited vote rigging allegations. The situation has led to fears of violence similar to what was seen in 2007 and 2017 following presidential election results. It also follows reports of 3 election officials being injured before the announcement. 55-year-old Ruto ran on a platform addressing class divisions and a pledge to reward low-income hustlers. 5 Europeans captured while fighting alongside Ukrainian forces face trial in a court backed by pro-Russian separatists in Donetsk. According to Russian media on Monday, they are accused of being mercenaries under the laws of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. 3 of the accused, Briton John Harding, Croat Vyacheslav Prebek, and Swede Matthias Gustafsson, could face the death penalty. All 5 have pleaded not guilty. Reports say the court has slated the next hearing for October. This follows a similar court case in June where the DPR's Supreme Court sentenced 2 Britons and a Moroccan to death on charges of being mercenaries. Russia's space agency Roscosmos has revealed a new model of what its independent space station will look like. The model, called Ros, was unveiled at a military-industrial exhibition on Monday. It reaffirms Russia's intention to leave the International Space Station by 2024. Newly appointed Roscosmos head Yuri Borisov said that the new station will be sent up into orbit in 2 phases and that it would provide a wider observable view of Earth for Russian cosmonauts. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Tuesday afternoon. Skies in the capital have seen a complete turnaround. However, the bulk of heavy rain is striking southern regions even after heavy rain alerts mostly expired. Instead, parts of Jeollanam-do and Gyeongsang-nam-do provinces are under a preliminary heavy rain alert. So make sure your outdoor furniture and accessories are safely stored or firmly secured in case of flooding. Well, lashing rain will batter the south coast with precipitation of up to 150 millimeters. And Jeju Island also could see up to 100 millimeters. And with some areas still affected by damage from earlier rain, please be extra careful to avoid any additional problems. The rain will subside later today in most regions, but continue until Thursday in some areas. Now, heat alerts have been all lifted due to the rain. Checking today's high temperatures, it's hovering around 30 degrees in most regions. And tomorrow, we have scattered showers for inland regions, and be mindful of landslide alerts in Jeollabuk-do province, which might be expanded later. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
That ends Tuesday's edition of the Daily Report. We'll be back with more coverage tomorrow. Join us then.